Kawhi Leonard is expected to re-sign with the Los Angeles Clippers this summer, barring a quote-unquote dramatic turn of events. From two very reputable sources, might I add, Sam Amick and John Hollinger. This is also from The Athletic. So when I go up against someone so credible, I better be able to back up my facts because, ladies and gentlemen, this is uncharted territory for yours truly. But I wasn't sure if I should make a video like this, so I took to my Instagram page to ask all of you guys a question. Should Kawhi Leonard leave the Los Angeles Clippers in free agency? And this is nuts because look at all these responses. Shout outs to everyone that participated. This gave me the confidence to make this video today. And if you're not following us on Instagram, I literally only have Instagram and Twitter so I could feature your takes in these videos. So in episode 2 of the Laced Up podcast featuring myself, Get Like Coop, and Mike Korzemba, there was a topic that I didn't even bring up. Mike Korzemba brought it up. And it was a topic that after I discussed it with the guys, I figured, okay, I definitely need to make a video on this because this is interesting. And if you want to see episode 2 of the Laced Up podcast, it's officially live on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course our YouTube channel, Laced Up. We're running a giveaway on that channel to give away a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X to a brand new subscriber that turns on our notifications on that channel. And at the time that you're watching this video, currently only 8,900 people have entered. So compared to giveaways I've held on this channel in the past, you have some pretty freaking good odds of winning a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? 2 years ago, the Los Angeles Clippers were probably the most exciting team in the entire NBA, coming straight off of a playoff performance where they were able to take the eventual Western Conference champion Golden State Warriors to 6 games off the backs of players like Patrick Beverley, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and Ivica Zubac. The future was looking bright for this Los Angeles Clippers team. Now, when you couple that with the fact that the Los Angeles Clippers had a tremendous amount of cap space and they were heading into a free agency period where Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, Kemba Walker, Jimmy Butler, and Kawhi Leonard were all set to become free agents, well, things were looking even more promising. Kawhi Leonard already came out and stated, even before he got traded to the Toronto Raptors, that he wanted to play in Los Angeles once his contract is up. And the question remained, will Kawhi Leonard sign with the Los Angeles Clippers or the Los Angeles Lakers? And is the fact that he won a NBA championship going to throw a wrench into his plans? After all, who wins a situation where you just won an NBA championship to go to a different team? Unless if you're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it rarely ever happens in the NBA. But needless to say, the Los Angeles Clippers were a dream scenario for any superstar. You see, NBA stars move teams for a variety of different reasons. A specific star that's already a face of a franchise might want to leave their team in order to increase his chances of winning an NBA championship. For example, Anthony Davis. He left the New Orleans Pelicans despite being the face of their franchise and demanded a trade to the Los Angeles Lakers so he could increase his chances of winning an NBA championship and potentially be more marketable because he's in Los Angeles. A player like Kyrie Irving, for example, was set to take the reins from LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Eventually, he demanded a trade, got traded to the Boston Celtics. He felt like he had a very questionable fit over there and eventually formed a super team on the Brooklyn Nets. And probably the best example of this is Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant was the face of the OKC Thunder, but unfortunately for him, at least in his opinion, he didn't feel like he was even close to winning an NBA championship. He eventually went to the Golden State Warriors, where the issue over there was he was able to win an NBA championship, but he didn't feel like he was the face of the franchise. He felt like that was Steph Curry's franchise, Draymond Green's franchise, Klay Thompson's franchise. And eventually, he decided to go to the Brooklyn Nets to form another super team with Kyrie Irving. In Kawhi Leonard's case, however, he already was the face of the Toronto Raptors for that 1 year. He was supposed to be the new building block for the San Antonio Spurs until some weird stuff happened with him getting injured and Greg Popovich trying to force him back too early, and then they lost trust with one another. Kawhi Leonard has already won championships. At this case, he wanted to be the face of a franchise, and ideally a franchise in his hometown. Another player that wanted that exact same thing was Paul George. Paul George was mired in rumors linking him to the Los Angeles Lakers, and prior to his trade to the OKC Thunder, there was actually a deal that almost took place between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Indiana Pacers for Paul George. The Lakers backed out because they felt like they would be able to easily sign Paul George that offseason and still be able to retain their assets in Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, D'Angelo Russell, etc., and that ended up blowing up in their face. Guys, let me know in the comment section down below what your favorite point of life is, because my favorite era of my life had to have been college. In college, I lifted a ton of weights, did a lot of all-nighters, made a ton of friends, and took out a huge loan. And one of the most stressful things of your life could be paying off that loan successfully, which is why I highly recommend Upstart, which is the fast and easy way to get a personal loan to pay off your debt all online. You could use this to pay off credit card debt or consolidate high-interest debt or fund personal expenses like groceries. Now, unlike other vendors, Upstart looks at more than just your credit score. They look at your income and employment history, so this means that they can offer smarter rates with trusted partners. Over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get a simple fixed monthly payment. It only takes 5 minutes online to check your rate up front for loans from $1,000 to $50,000. You can even get approved for this loan on the same day and can receive funds literally as fast as one business day. So if debt is taking over your life, it's time to get a fresh start with Upstart. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/Mike. That's upstart.com/Mike. And don't forget to use our URL to let them know we sent you. So let's go back to the moment Kawhi Leonard made his decision. It was pretty much a race between the Lakers and the Clippers. The Lakers were literally waiting on Kawhi Leonard to make up his mind. Will he form a super team on the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis? Or will he sign with a different team? Bear in mind, the Clippers weren't officially in the race at that time. They came out of nowhere to sign Kawhi Leonard, and many of us didn't necessarily expect it. Most of us thought it was either between the Toronto Raptors and the Los Angeles Lakers, and he completely shook the NBA when not only did he announce that he was signing with the Los Angeles Clippers, but literally 15 minutes later, we got a report that the Los Angeles Clippers were going to trade 5 first-round picks for Paul George. Now, this is where things get interesting, because the Clippers formed this awesome super team, in my opinion. And yes, I'll call them a super team because there was parity in the NBA at the time. You have your 2 star players in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Both are remarkable two-way players. But on top of that, you surrounded them with remarkable shooters and fantastic scorers. Montrezl Harrell ended up winning 6th Man of the Year, even though he was a bit of a liability in the playoffs. Lou Williams was already a multi-year 6th Man of the Year winner. Patrick Beverley was a very capable defender, and as the year went on, they were able to acquire players like Marcus Morris and Reggie Jackson. But unfortunately, things didn't go according to plan for the Los Angeles Clippers. For one, the core of Paul George, Lou Williams, Kawhi Leonard, Patrick Beverley, and Montrezl Harrell didn't have enough time to play together and establish their team chemistry. And unfortunately, during the NBA playoffs, during their playoff run, that lack of chemistry showed in the form of Montrezl Harrell getting into it with Paul George in the middle of a series with the Denver Nuggets. You had memes about Paul George's inability to score score in playoff time. Couple that with complete and utter coaching failures and a lack of adjustments by Doc Rivers, like electing to leave Montrezl Harrell on the court despite the Clippers being a -30 net rating with Montrezl Harrell in instead of Ivica Zubac, and eventually the Clippers would blow a 3-1 series lead against the Denver Nuggets. Now here's the thing, and if you're a Clipper fan, I know this could be very frustrating for you. The Clippers didn't really have a choice. They were an 8th-seeded team who was approached by a superstar who was told pretty much, hey, if you trade for Paul George, I'm going to come over as well. But the Los Angeles Clippers essentially gave up all of their leverage in the moment that they traded for Paul George at the same time. Imagine Kawhi Leonard coming to you saying, hey, I'll only join your team if you trade for Paul George. You approach the OKC Thunder about Paul George, and they say that we're only trading you Paul George if you give up 5 first-round picks for him. Now, when Paul George's contract expires, you have no choice but to pay him, which is exactly what the Los Angeles Clippers ended up doing when they maxed out Paul George. But there's another issue. Kawhi Leonard signed a 2-year deal in 2019, with a year being a player option, and he plans on opting out this summer. Now, I'm going to be honest, he was going to opt out anyway, just for financial reasons. But things have changed for the Los Angeles Clippers as a franchise drastically since the moment Kawhi Leonard put pen to paper. For one, that supporting cast that took the Golden State Warriors to 6 games in the 2019 NBA playoffs is officially gone. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Danilo Gallinari were traded to the OKC Thunder for Paul George. Avery Bradley would sign with the Los Angeles Lakers. Montrezl Harrell would join him a year after the Clippers' first year together. Wilson Chandler would leave the Los Angeles Clippers as well. And after one failed year together, and of course some controversy between Doc Rivers and Paul George, which we've made videos on in the past, I'll leave a link in the end screen, the Clippers are no longer the team that Kawhi Leonard elected to join. On top of that, they've made some moves that could potentially scare away a potential free agent. For example, Lou Williams took a pay cut to stay in Los Angeles. He was tired of switching teams consistently and took a pay cut and signed for $8 million a year. And the Los Angeles Clippers would trade him for Rajon Rondo because they desperately needed a point guard. Now, I understand this is a business, but that sends a message to other players that, hey, even if you do your team a favor and take a pay cut to try to stay with them, if they have to trade you and make a business decision that's best for them, they'll do it. And what's even more terrifying for the Los Angeles Clippers is there's a report that Kawhi Leonard would potentially be interested in joining forces with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo on the Miami Heat. I'm going to preface this by saying this is one of those reports where the source is just some random NBA agent that chose to stay anonymous, so we could question the credibility of this source. But according to this NBA agent, Kawhi Leonard could very well listen to pitches from other teams. That is something that he is considering. And if that does end up being the case, he would be intrigued at the possibility of joining the Miami Heat. Joining forces with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo is something that he would absolutely have interest in. Now, I'll tell you why I think there is a very legitimate possibility that Kawhi Leonard could leave. The Los Angeles Clippers currently are what they are. There's no cap space to sign additional free agents. They gave big contracts to players like Marcus Morris and Luke Kennard and the aforementioned Paul George. And to be fair, although the Clippers got dealt a bad hand, we could all agree that so far it just hasn't been working. So the argument for Kawhi Leonard leaving is this is literally the Clippers. This is their ceiling. This is the team that needs to be able to be good enough to make it past the Utah Jazz, Phoenix Suns, Denver Nuggets, and Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA playoffs. And when you compare all of these teams, you have to admit that the Clippers are probably the weakest out of that bunch. So if Kawhi Leonard wants to maximize his chances of winning, it's in his best interest to leave. At the same time, Kawhi Leonard initially wanted to be the face of a Los Angeles-based franchise. He's already won championships in his career, and I wouldn't be surprised if he just wants to settle down and focus on his ability to become a bit more marketable, and that's what Los Angeles can offer him. So at the end of the day, Kawhi Leonard's decision about leaving the Los Angeles Clippers potentially would come down to what he values most. Does he still want to be competitive and win more championships, or is he content with the fact that his team's going to take a step back and they'll be fringe contenders? But in my opinion, come on, I don't think the Los Angeles Clippers are going to contend. Bear in mind, the Clippers don't have a NBA draft pick until the 2027 NBA draft. So let me know in the comment section down below what you think about all this. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping her mic until our next upload.